Well, having turned the page on Iraq, President Obama will now turn his attention to trying to solve the conflict in the Middle East. After a year and a half of arm twisting, he succeeded in bringing Israeli and Palestinian leaders to Washington this week to begin a new round of peace talks. And all the participants are vowing not to be distracted by an attack in Israel overnight, which killed 4 Jewish settlers, including a pregnant woman. Middle East correspondent Ben Knight reports.
In Jerusalem, Jewish settlers bury their dead. The murder of 4 people driving in their car in the West Bank last night has ignited outrage, just as it was intended to. Attacks like this are not uncommon when new peace talks are gearing up. This attack happened just as the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was touching down in Washington to begin the first peace negotiations in almost 2 years.
We will not let the blood of Israeli civilians go unpunished. We will find the murderers. We will punish their dispatchers. We will not let terror decide where Israelis live or the configuration of our final borders.
But crucially, he says the talks will go on. And certainly the US is not about to let this incident derail a year and a half of diplomacy.
It's one of the reasons why the Prime Minister is here today, to engage in direct negotiations with those Palestinians who themselves have rejected a path of violence in favor of a path of peace.
Responsibility for this attack has been claimed by the military wing of Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist organisation that controls the Gaza Strip. The attack appears to be aimed at Hamas's main political rival, Fatah, which controls the Palestinian Authority, which runs the West Bank and is the other half of these Washington talks. Palestinian security forces will be searching just as hard as the Israelis to find those responsible, to show that they can control military groups in the West Bank and are ready to run their own state. Reports say hundreds of arrests have already been made. It was ever thus. Israel says it can't guarantee its own security if it pulls its troops out of the West Bank. The Palestinians demand that Israel stop building Jewish towns on their land. And the issue of settlements has once again been front and centre in the lead-up to these talks. Many Israelis were outraged when American pressure led to Israel's government calling a temporary halt to new building in the West Bank to help pave the way for these peace talks. Now, just as those talks are getting underway, the building moratorium is about to end, and pressure is growing on Israel not to start building again. Neither side wants to do anything that could be seen as causing these talks to fail.
Shalom to you in Israel. I know we have disappointed you.
Palestinian leaders are this week appearing in a series of TV ads promising Israelis they'll negotiate in good faith.
I am your partner. Are you mine?
In reality, after nearly 20 years of talks, most of the work on reaching a deal has already been done. But the last hurdles are the toughest to clear. Palestinians will most likely have to give up on the right of millions of refugees in camps around the Middle East to return to Israel. Israelis will most likely have to accept sharing Jerusalem, as well as evacuating Jewish settlements on Palestinian land. But there are other Israelis who feel that their nation is running out of time, and the longer it keeps building on Palestinian land, the harder it becomes to create a Palestinian state, and the more Israel loses support from the US and the international community.
There is one alternative that's very quietly spoken of on either side of the line, and it's this: that Israel become a single state, that it absorb this Palestinian territory into its nation. But there's a dilemma for Israel, because if it gives its new Palestinian citizens the vote, then they very quickly become the majority, and Israel ceases to be a Jewish state. If it doesn't give them the vote, it becomes an apartheid state, and it betrays the democratic principles that it was founded on 62 years ago.
For settlers like Yuval Sondak, that's a price he's willing to pay to fulfil his dream of building on the land that he regards as part of Israel.
I depend on God, and I think that He wants us to live here.
And what the rest of the world might think is irrelevant. Ben Knight, Lateline.